thought there must be a better way to benefit both doctors and hospitals. Process costs the hospital somewhere between 15 to 25% on top of the locum doctor rate. Go through a locum agency and that hospital wants to contract a doctor. The agency takes what's called like a temp to perm contract rate or a lock-in contract or a buyout clause, which is tens of thousands of dollars. And just a month ago, I left locum work to start doing this full time to really give it a big push.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Passive Income Doctor. And today we welcome back Dr. Anu to the show. Many of you would have enjoyed the initial chat we had, I think it was about 18 months ago now. Is that right?
Yeah, it seems like a while ago.
Yeah. Excited to catch up and see what's changed in the last 12 to 18 months. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. I'm excited to see how we've both gone on in that time.
Yeah. So I guess the main one which I can see on the social media is StatDoctor. Do you want to share with our listeners, first of all, what it does and how the journey has been?
So, just for those who didn't see the first episode, I'm Dr. Anu. I'm a PGY6. I came over from New Zealand in 2020 in the height of COVID, got very burnt out working in a metro ED, and then did kind of 4 to 5 years of locum work until today. During that time of locuming, got quite frustrated with the locum system. I had problems with contracts, with payments, with agencies, with hospitals, etc. And I thought there must be a better way to benefit both doctors and hospitals. So a couple of years ago, I came up with this concept of StatDoctor, which was a marketplace type platform that links doctors directly with hospitals and clinics, trying to create a tech-based pathway and process that would eliminate the bureaucracy that kind of plagued the locum agency system. And that's kind of when I first had a chat with you. That's probably 18 months ago. And since then, kind of things have progressed. We've built a kind of brand, we've built the app, it's now functioning. We have doctors on the platform working, we have hospitals advertising sick shifts, mainly in Victoria. And just a month ago, I left locum work to start doing this full time to really give it a big push.
Yeah, wow. And that must have been a kind of big decision for you. Do you want to kind of share your feelings and I guess your process, mental process at the time, how you kind of came to that decision to kind of, as you said, leave clinical medicine for now and focus on this startup full time?
Of course, it was a really tough decision. So for all of this year and last year, I was working full time as a locum doctor, making quite good money as an ED registrar slash gen surg registrar this year. And I was working 50 to 60 hours a week, and then at the same time trying to build a startup. And that was taking 50 to 60 hours a week as well. And so for a good year and a half, I was really struggling to do both. And particularly coming to the last 2 months of working, I found myself not being able to give 100% to either. And I was feeling like my clinical practice, my head was always in the startup world. And when I was startup building StatDoctor, my head was kind of thinking more clinical practice. And so something had to give. And I realized that I had to try and really push StatDoctor if I wanted to make it work. Particularly, I'm giving myself 6 months to a year. I'm still doing some intermittent telehealth work and locum work to pay the bills, etc. But have really committed to full-time StatDoctor, social media, building a brand, sales, marketing, etc. And we've built a small team at StatDoctor. There's 5 of us now. And we all share this vision of trying to make locum work more equitable, affordable for a public healthcare system, and easy, particularly for doctors.
Yeah. Do you want to share some of those things? Like, I guess there's a huge cost, sometimes in the media about locum agencies, and you can share as little or as much as you want about the numbers. Yeah, what is the kind of problem you see? Well, let's focus mainly for hospitals and healthcare providers, and I guess how does kind of StatDoctor help?
Of course. So I think there's quite a few problems. The first is there are so many locum agencies. So I recently was doing a bit of a stock take of all the medical locum agencies in Australia, and there's 63 I could find. So 63 locum agencies who all provide similar-ish services. And so a hospital that is desperately looking for a doctor realistically needs to send out a message to 30, 40, 50 of these. And since I've kind of moved to StatDoctor and started seeing these email lists that they send out of shifts, there's a good 50 locum agencies per shift that goes out where they try and span to try and fill the shifts they want. Each locum agency then relays that message on to the doctors they have on their system. Some locum agencies are quite big and have 50,000, 60,000 doctors that they can communicate with. Some locum agencies are more boutique and have hundreds, maybe 1,000 doctors. The doctor then agrees to the shift. The locum agency then relays that message back to the hospital, and the hospital can look over the documentation and accept that shift. That process costs the hospital somewhere between 15 to 25% on top of the locum doctor rate. So
Mm,
if the locum doctor is making, let's say, $2,000, which is probably an average HMO shift, that's $2,000. So if we say 20%, that's $400 that goes to the locum agency per shift. And so if a doctor is working a 2 month stint, a 3 month stint, that cost adds up. And so I was recently talking to one of my friends who's in the locum agency space, asking why that percentage is so high. And it's really because there's so much administrative and contractual burden on the agency. And so their overheads are so high
mm,
that because they're paying for insurances, they're paying tax, they're paying staff. So they have to then charge a premium to make a profit.
mm.
And
Just a quick
for
question. I don't know if you know, but so let's pretend 20% goes to a locum agency.
yeah.
Of that 20%, say that $400, is there like a industry average of what their profit would be after all their costs? Or
I'm not exactly sure, but I would say somewhere in the 5% mark would where I
wow.
would estimate. I'm not sure of that though.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
kind of through my non-exact discussions with people
Yep.
in the space and people around the space. So don't
Yeah.
hold me
Huge
to
overheads. Yeah.
that. But it shows exactly. That shows how much particularly insurance is extremely expensive. They have to pay insurance on all the doctors on their books because essentially the way it works is they sublet the doctor to the hospital. So the doctor's contracted to the agency who's then sublet to the hospital. And that subletting process, you have to have quite strong insurance on all the doctors under your care.
Mm.
And
Is
so
this
I
true
think
for all
that,
states? Because I know some of the New South Wales hospitals, they say for this locum placement will be indemnified by the hospital.
so that's the indemnity insurance. So indemnity insurance is the insurance in which if I make a mistake as a
Yep.
doctor,
Yeah.
what happens? And so yeah, that's mainly covered by all the public hospitals. But I think the insurance is in terms of employer insurance. So because you're sublet as an employer, there's
Oh, like
insurance
work
there.
cover and things like that.
Yeah,
Or
workers' compensation, etc. I think it adds up.
okay.
And so initially I was quite critical of that 20%, thinking that these were money hungry agencies seeking 20% for themselves. But the more I've done research, I've seen that there's just so much bureaucracy and overhead politics.
Okay.
And so that's something that we've tried to completely eliminate through StatDoctor is we have no contracts with our doctors.
Mm,
So doctors create a profile, upload all their documentation, and we verify them on the platform. And then that entire package of their documentation, their references, all sits with them. So if they apply for a shift at a hospital and the hospital accepts, all of that documentation and their profile goes to that hospital. The
mm,
hospital verifies them and directly signs the doctor onto a short-term
mm,
contract with the hospital. And so by doing that, we completely eliminate the need to have contracts with our doctors, insurance with any doctors. We just provide the tech in the middle. And by doing that, we can cut costs down to, we charge hospitals just $49 per shift. And we're some
wow.
of the hospitals we're working with, saving them thousands of dollars. And we also, because we have no contracts with the doctor, if the hospital can entice that doctor to be a full-time staff member, we have no say in it. Whereas if you go through a locum agency and that hospital wants to contract a doctor, the agency takes what's called like a temp to perm contract rate or a lock-in contract or a buyout clause, which is tens of thousands of dollars. And I think that really affects rural and regional hospitals that struggle for staffing anyway. And doctors don't want to go there. But often when a doctor goes there as locums and goes, hang on, I really like this place, maybe I'll stay on for longer. That's how we can try and help our rural and remote workforce.
Yes, and I think that makes a lot of sense because you can imagine some of these rural hospitals, they might like a particular locum and then but then worry about this expensive payout or buyout clause. So tell us more about this app. I guess myself, I don't have much technical expertise or any really in this area. Like, how did you go about building the app, knowing which companies or I don't know software developers to trust and trying to budget for these things? And I'm sure maybe there's budget overruns, and how have you found building the app, the technology?
So I'm very clinically focused. I have, before 2 years ago, I had no tech knowledge, minimal business knowledge, and that has been a steep learning curve for me. I've really loved it, but I've had to kind of take things from first principles and learn stuff right from the start. So I initially went into what's called an incubator program or an accelerator program, and there are lots of those around Australia where they help validate your idea. You can do some market research with them and you can kind of build a very temporary on the paper type model of what you want to get. And so I went through a program with a company called Hyper Apps and they were fantastic. They also added on business development and some business education, which I really needed. How to talk to investors, how to speak the business language, which is very different from clinical language. So I did that back in 2022, started 2023. And as a result of that, I kind of had some vague designs. I was also fortunate enough to be part of the AUSCEP program.
Mm,
So STEP stands for Australian Clinical Entrepreneur Program. It's a program run in Melbourne and Victoria and New South Wales for clinicians, not just doctors, but nurses, pharmacists, anyone in the healthcare clinician space, where if anyone's looking to innovate, you can apply to be part of the program. It's government funded, and they take you through a 12-month program where they explain how to transition. Again, more business stuff, help you really ferment your idea. They helped me kind of pro to think about how my MVP would work. And through both of those programs, I got linked in with a few developers, and I chose a company called Techni HQ, who are a development company based in Melbourne, but their developers are in China. And through that, I was able to really cut down the costs compared to if you have full developers or giving part of my company away to a technical co-founder, which some people do. But in my mind, I was thinking if I could build a scaffold of the marketplace, there wouldn't be much extra technical knowledge that would be needed. So I'd rather pay for a tech upfront and I pay ongoing costs for any changes I want to make instead of giving 30%, 50% of the company up to a technical co-founder, not really knowing how much they would contribute.
mm.
Um, so that transition was really difficult. Finding the right developers really difficult. I've had a few of my friends in that space really struggle, find people who did a bad job, paid for cheap developers overseas without having the tech knowledge to verify what they're doing was correct, etc. So I
So
think
you had
just one of
this,
the
so you had this kind of like locally based company that oversaw all the technical work from the Chinese-based software developers. Is that right?
Yeah, so the tech company itself, all their developers are Chinese based. So they're still an Australian entity. So the CEO, it's a gentleman named Gordon, he is a technical person, but he hires and or his employees are developers in China so that the labor costs are cheaper. It's the same as most development companies have developers in India or China or Asia because you can just get great quality for low prices. But I just wanted to make sure that that quality was oversaw by someone Australian based that I could communicate with well,
Yep.
that I trusted, and Gordon gave me that from Technique.
How did these tech companies quote or charge? Is it per project? Is it an hourly rate? Is it like how do you budget for that as a founder?
So it's per project for me. So because I'd gone through Hyper and OSCEP, I had what we would call the UI UX, the user experience and the user interface, and all of my frames for what I wanted my app to look like already
Mm,
designed.
mm,
And so I could take all of that to a developer and say, here is 50 frames, 100 frames, etc. What is the cost for all of this? And one thing that, particularly with the marketplace, that I hadn't really thought about is the app is only one part of it. So you have to build an Apple app, you have to build a Google App Store app. But then I also had to build a website platform for the hospitals and the clinics. And then I had to build an admin portal so that I could oversee everything. So actually, I had to build four different tech things that all communicated with each other. And so particularly with apps, they're expensive. So you're hitting six figures easily with
yeah.
almost any app that you want to build. Um, and so that's why I think a lot of people try and do what's called web-based apps, where you have a website that can then be used on your phone.
Yeah.
But the benefits I wanted to provide doctors were purely app-based. Like I wanted last minute notification. So I'm here in Melbourne. If the Northern Hospital had a shift that they wanted to do, they could put it on StatDoctor and it would ping on my phone and then I could pick it up in like a second. You can't get that with a website,
Website.
no matter how you try.
Okay. Okay. So you mean like if it was a website based one, then the doctor would have to like log in and check rather than them getting an app notification like Facebook and that.
Yeah, and that's how it is with all the agencies at the moment. They're all email based or they have like a website where you can go and search shifts, which I think is really good. But one of the things I really wanted to bring in was the push notification value of a phone app so that doctors could pick up last minute shifts, particularly in metro areas like this or in rural areas where you have limited staff and you're all just trying to cover each other. I was working in Portland recently and there were doctors in Hamilton just an hour away. So if we had no staff, could there be a notification to these Hamilton doctors for them to just come over or the Warrnambool doctors to come over and help us out? Because there's nothing worse than working understaffed. And in rural towns, you're actually sometimes working non-staffed, which is even worse.
Mm, mm. Did you have a budget in mind when you initially having this and has it has it blown out double, triple or
Yes, I had a budget in mind. It's blown up probably two to two and a half times. Not just tech though. The business side of things is expensive. So trying to get out time off work, opportunity cost, we've got a small, like I've got a co-founder, we've hired a brand team, we've got sales reps, all of that
Mm,
adds up before you even blink.
mm,
But doing it on your own, particularly because I was working full time as a locum as well, was almost impossible. So I needed help. Otherwise, there was no point.
mm.
So
How did you
we
decide to build the team? Like in terms of knowing who to hire and when to hire, I guess is probably an equally important thing as well.
I really wanted the entire StatDoctor team to be doctors and locum doctors. Like one thing I really wanted everything to be was people who truly understood the problem and could also use their networks as part of joining the team to help accelerate the marketing and branding. So our entire team are doctors and locum doctors. Well, we've got one medical student, and they each bring in such valuable insight. We have like monthly meetings, and they bring valuable insight to people who are in their connection. They've used the platform and don't like this about it, and it just allows great collaboration.
Mm. So when you say sales rep, like what did the sales rep do? Do they like cold or warm outreach to the hospitals and these are doctors as well, or
Yeah, so it's both. It's a commission-based rep role, so we're not turning over any much revenue, and so these are doctors who, um, if they can onboard a hospital, get any profit margin that we have as a result, just to try and turn over sales and generation. And we've got three at the moment, and mainly warm and cold outreach, mainly Victoria based. A lot of them, where they pick up a locum shift, they will then approach the HR department or the heads or the board and say, hey, look, have you considered this alternate option? I'm on here, etc.
Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of like a profit sharing arrangement. Yeah, percent. Okay. Yeah. And that is interesting. I think, having a doctor-based team, and I guess that may set you apart from other kind of doctor-led companies. Is that right?
Yeah, what I'd really like to get to is a stage where all of our, like a lot of our early doctors are also investors in the platform. So I'd love to be able to give parts of the company so that they feel like they're involved in this movement that we're creating. And so that we're all helping each other build a better platform for doctors and hospitals to form and work and connect. And so if we have 100 doctors doing that who all have skin in the game of StatDoctor, we can really build the platform out nicely.
And another aspect of a startup is, I guess, like raising money. Have you brought on investors, or is it just self-funded, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, at the moment it's fully bootstrapped, but it's interesting you have mentioned that literally 2 hours ago I've just come away from an investor pitch where I was pitching to a couple of investors, angel investors in the platform, and it looks like we're making good progress towards a deal. So I'm hoping it won't be long till we have some outside money to really springboard us forward. Instead of the thing with I've put in a lot of personal money towards it, and so has my co-founder. But it's the springboard effect needs to happen where you need to get external money, and I think most startups will feel that at some point.
Mm. And with these angel investors, I guess always like, is it you have to give up some level of control, or like, well, I guess you have to because they're investing, but like how, um, I guess this is a space not too many doctors are familiar with. Like, how do you go around navigating and negotiating, kind of a percentage of company for X amount of funding? I guess most listeners might be familiar with Shark Tank, but yeah.
It feels a bit like Shark Tank sometimes, and I've been kind of talking to investors for the last 6 months, probably. I think the thing to know is there's different types of investors is the first thing. So there's your friends and family where you try and get them to put money in. That's always a good start. Then you have what are called angel investors, which are high net worth individuals who will invest, and that kind of sums of money are in the lower, maybe the hundreds of thousands type amounts. And those types of money are quite good because you can continue the vision that you want. You still have good control. And then you have venture capitalist funding, which is a big corporation, takes part of your company. Usually, that's for high sums of money because you need those high sums of money. So if you're doing like AI or deep tech or some sort of biotech, you probably need some sort of what we call VC funding. But the knowledge is that the VCs have a bit more stronger control over the trajectory of your company. So, in talking to investors and over the last 6 months, when we're looking at raising, the first step is to, I guess, value your company, to look at what you got, what you're turning over, what your market size is, what market share you think you can get. And that step is about building what's called a pitch deck. So it's like a Google or Canva presentation. There's lots of good examples of Airbnb and Uber's pitch decks to try and summarize because whilst you as the founder know the market really well and the space really well, and you have this big dream, you've got to remember that angel investors aren't necessarily doctors, they aren't necessarily healthcare, they aren't necessarily going to know anything about this market. So you need to share your vision with them, explain why monetarily it would make sense for them to put in whatever the amount of money you're wanting is for whatever percent you're willing to give up. And then I guess the third step is negotiate. So wherever you start is unlikely going to be where they're going to come on board. And then you try and find some sort of middle ground that works for both of you.
Yeah, exciting, exciting. I love it. Good negotiation.
Yeah.
And Just lost my train of thought there for a sec. And that's right. So with this raising money, like, do you have a plan for, where to best utilize this money? Is it mainly going to go back into the app, the technology, or is it kind of marketing or like, what is your plans?
So what we have at the moment is what's called an MVP, a minimal viable product. So it's the bare minimum functionalities that we thought we could get away with to prove that there was a market for it and that we could make money from. So that's always the first place to start with anyone wanting to build an app or start a company is to build an MVP. And then you can take that MVP and that proof of concept to an investor to then get the money you want to build your dream. And so that's most of the money we raise will go towards tech into building what I vision as our end goal. And that is a marketplace is just one small portion of what I want to build. I want to build an entire app as a home for doctors. I'd love to build a community angle to it where people can post, communicate, share their experiences of locuming, an education platform so that people can continue to keep up with their CPD because it's often quite lonely and difficult to do that when you're locuming. And then also build in some online events, which I've started doing all of those individually outside of the app, but I'd like to collaborate it all into one place. And that's kind of where I would see maybe a year down the track StatDoctor being. So it would be like, oh, you're a doctor in Australia, make sure you have StatDoctor because there's just so much value on there. Even if you're a full-time doctor and not locuming, it's good to know what shifts are around you at what rate, or there's really cool events happening in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane that you want to not miss, etc.
Yeah. And that brings us, I guess, shifting gears a bit. Like, how are you finding the local market? Like some agencies and some doctors are a little bit pessimistic, saying, cutting costs and try and maybe hire um, immigration of doctors to fill permanent roles and maybe won't need locum doctors. Like, what do you say to that?
The locum market's really tough at the moment for doctors. There was a really great bright patch between 2021 and 2023 where COVID had hit, there was restrictions, there was a lack of doctors, there was this huge demand and lack of supply, and doctors had their way. And then this year, things have really slowed down. There's been opening of borders. UK doctor credentialing has gotten so much easier for them to come over here. Every second doctor next to you as a locum as a UK doctor. And 2025, I think, is probably going to get worse with the way the NHS is, with the way there's just so much migration here. I think finding locum shifts is going to be really hard for doctors. And so I would say to doctors, if you are thinking of locoming in 2025, you need to find ways to put yourself ahead of anyone else applying for those sorts of jobs.
Mm.
And so one of the ways I was able to do that in 2024 is signing contracts directly with the hospitals.
Mm.
And that way I was able to say to a hospital, like, you're saving the 20%, and that I was able to get shifts pretty easily all throughout 2024.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's always kind of adapting and knowing the market,
Mm.
and yeah, planning ahead. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
What about telehealth? I've seen some of your LinkedIn posts about different telehealth companies, which we may or may not, or probably not name. Some argue telehealth is the future, kind of customer demand, kind of like, in this world of instant gratification, Uber Eats and things like that. While other people argue that it's kind of leaning towards a fragmentation of care and away from good traditional family practice care. What do you think will happen over the next few years?
I think telehealth is definitely the future. I think it's very valuable for doctors. It's the first time ever in our profession we've been able to work remotely. I've always been jealous of people who have been able to do working holidays, etc. We finally have that ability to still have practice here in Melbourne, but also go on a holiday to the Gold Coast with our family, etc. So I don't think that there's ever going to be a regression of where we've gotten to telehealth, but there needs to be better regulation and sanctioning of those that are doing it wrong. And because it's such a lucrative market, particularly like I know that telehealth cannabis is a really big thing, telehealth medical certificates is a really big thing. I think those are not necessarily the best uses of telehealth, um, but I feel like there's not clear guidelines or regulations yet. And I know some people who are working on building those, and I look forward to when those come in because then it will really help. Like, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for any telehealth company to have some sort of home base, like a home building at least, and offer some sort of face-to-face at some point in time. I think that that could be some sort of regulation that comes in at some point in the future.
And we can talk a bit about yeah, how have you found building a social media presence and a brand? I mean, brand is a word that's always kind of loosely thrown about. Like, what have you found like building and then yeah, is it mainly focusing on your own personal brand or is it, you know, the company's brand such as StatDoctor? Like, what have you found you resonate with?
I'll start by saying it's really hard. I'm not particularly a big social media person. I'm not someone who's that comfortable in front of a camera or like standing in my hallway and making 8 videos to then like crop it into one. That's never anything I figured I would be. But also at the same time, the more you can build yourself or build your business as something that's knowledgeable or specialized in the space, which I feel I am in the locum space, having done it for so long. But just getting that idea out there to as many people as possible is really hard. So you can either pay for marketing, which is can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you kind of just spray at everyone, or you do it the other way. You elevate yourself as to someone very high in the space and then people look at you as someone so knowledgeable that they listen to the advice you give. And so, particularly for the last, I'd say 5 months, I've been trying really hard to build that presence. It involves regular videos, posting podcasts like I'm doing with you, and just trying to give as much value as I can for free. Like I'm giving away as much knowledge as I have. I've done webinars. I've shown people all the tips. I've introduced people to all sorts of hospitals and clinics and everything. Just trying to help the market as much as possible, give away as much um, value as possible, similar to it's called the Alex Hormozy method or something, similar to what he has done, where you give as much value as possible as you can, with the hope that people trust you and will look to you for solutions. And that's what I feel like StatDoctor is providing.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, any closing thoughts or kind of about how you found this entrepreneur journey and how can people find out more about StatDoctor?
Yeah, my closing thoughts would be I think it's really exciting what's happening in medicine at the moment. There's a big shift in doctors, particularly junior doctors, to not think about just the traditional paths, but looking at avenues outside of just racing to become a surgeon or a physician or a GP or a consultant and thinking, what are some other avenues? I think it started with intermittent locuming as a junior doctor, but now I've seen a lot of people leave clinical practice, start their own businesses, do consultancy, working for completely non-medical positions, but using their doctor knowledge in a very innovative way. And I think that that's a really exciting space to be in. I feel like a lot of other industries already do that. Like, how many engineers or lawyers do you know actually working as an engineer or lawyer? Not many, but whereas doctors, almost every doctor works as a doctor. So I think that the skills you learn in medicine can be applied to so many different routes. And that's something that I've been trying really hard to encourage in other people to see, look, you can do it. It's a really hard first step. And leaving clinical practice for me was the hardest thing I think I've done, and the hardest decision I've had to make because I've worked so hard. The pay is so good, and to come to somewhat of a nothing situation. And so any of your listeners who are interested in that sort of transition, I'd love to connect and help out. I'm pretty prominent on LinkedIn. Send me a message. You can always find me by email, anu@statdoctor.net, and yeah, see what you guys are up to.
Well, thank you again for coming onto our show and sharing your experiences and knowledge. I'm sure our listeners will have benefit from this and probably have lots of questions as well, so they can reach out either to yourself or to myself as well. Yeah, let's catch up again. I think, yeah, maybe another 12, 18 months and to see how your journey's gone there. So to our listeners, thanks again for tuning in and sharing the podcast. I've received lots of positive feedback, both from our doctor guests and also our non-doctor guests. So please subscribe, 5-star rating. Until next time.